Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Hi, Tim. Hey, what's with the butterfly net? Are we hunting for some lost species along in the Philippines?
Oh, come on. You know, sometimes you ask the most bizarre questions. Not really. I don't know a darn thing about butterflies. We're trying to grab anything paranormal. Our guest tonight says she has had a lifetime of paranormal experiences, and I figured maybe we can scoop up one or two to add to the ghostly notches on our own psychic hunter's belt.
Okay, that seems to be kind of a weird way of going about it, if you ask me. I sincerely doubt we'll latch on to anything paranormal this way.
Oh, think positive, Tim. We're getting closer to the portal up ahead, and if we play our cards right, who knows what we will encounter. I can see Bigfoot and UFOs and ghostly shadow-type figures.
I sure in the hell hope a butterfly net is the only thing we'll need. I think I'd rather be back at the KCOR radio studio and instead of confronting some green-ass Martian.
No, you just don't like green asses, I guess.
No.
All right, well, let's get through that porthole and back to Vegas and hook up with Tina and get the show on the road. Watch out for that butterfly net. Don't lose it.
Are we back
Hello,
yet?
Tim. I think we just squeezed through the portal.
Squeeze through something.
Hey, did we drag any entities with us?
Let me see here. Nope, not this time.
Oh, shucks. And I thought it was a big enough butterfly net, but I guess not. Well,
always go bigger.
So I see you. I hear you've had some bad storms out there.
Yes, it's there's a I guess like what's called what is it, a cyclonic system that's further to the west and north of us that's socking the central part of the country with snow, lots of snow and heavy wind. Well, further to the west where we are, we get thunderstorms and tornadoes. So yeah, there's that's March in Indiana for you.
Well, it certainly can't be a part of climate change because we all know there is no such thing.
Nope, nothing. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
There you go. Hey, so what are we discussing tonight? What's on our agenda?
Well, we're talking about paranormal experiences.
I gathered that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and I've said this before in other shows, I think that everybody at one point or another in their life has had some kind of paranormal experience. Some people more than just one, which, that's one of the things we're going to bring up on tonight's show. A lot of people, they avoid that. They try to reason themselves out of it. Oh, well, it's the light just had a bad fuse, or the dog was just barking at nothing, that sort of thing. But our guest tonight, she'll talk about not only her own experiences, but the experiences of others that have left them. Some of these experiences have been life-altering, some of them terrifying. All of them, though, are unexplainable.
Well, we like the unexplained, and we like the bizarre, and so go ahead, continue.
All right. Well, our guest tonight, and this is the first time that Adele has been on. We have on Adele Rocha. Now, Adele has traveled extensively to over 26 countries and has compiled accounts of terrifying and uncanny experiences in both her native country of the Philippines and abroad. Now, Adele started as Eliza Simon in episode 2 of the pilot UFOs Over Earth, while she was a field investigator for MUFON. Her personal experiences with the bizarre has led to a lifetime quest investigating sightings and paranormal events through eyewitness reports. Now, Adele is a screenwriter of science fiction and horror with over 11 screenplays, which have been placed in competitions in the United States, and she's adapted for the screen books by Philip Mantle and Paul Stonehill, good friends of ours, who are prominent investigators and authors in the field of ufology. Now, her book is called Portal, A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences. This is her first book, and it's a compilation, of eyewitness accounts and her own personal encounters with the unknown and terrifying. Now, Adele is a trained therapist and amateur travel photographer, and we're very happy to have her tonight on Exploring the Bizarre. So welcome, Adele.
Hi, Tim and Tim.
How are you? How are you?
Oh, good, good.
And you know, I hope you have better success than we have with some screenplays. I just received the check today, Tim, and I sent you over your cut for a movie we did. Well, we have to admit it's been about 10 years ago now, but the royalties have shrunk down to $22. But hey,
sorry to hear that.
Well, I'm amazed it's still coming in, though, after all this time.
Well, you know, this is one of the few honest distributors of low-budget DVDs. He does continue to pay, as opposed to others who never even sent us $22. So I don't know. Yeah, what are you going to do? But that's neither here nor there. I want to ask you, why did you pick the word portal in your title? Does it have a particular meaning to you?
Well, when I started writing the book, what I thought we had in common with all the different encounters from different people was the fact that all these beings, entities, aliens and whatnot were all coming from a different dimension. And when I think, when I think about a different dimension, I always think about them coming through something like a wormhole. You know, and I think someone even talked about how, you know, some of these aliens come through from a totally different galaxy, and in order to get here on time, they have to enter a wormhole. And to me, probably the more common term of that would be a portal, like a door, you know, coming from the other side of the veil. So whatever nature they have, I think they're coming to us from another dimension or another type of reality. So that's why.
Well, here's a question for you. Do they know each other?
That's a good question. There really is.
Of course. I didn't get to this position, you know, just by luck.
By your good looks.
Yeah, luck. I said luck. Yes.
So, you know, the book talks about different experiences, as you've stated. That was something that I had compiled, and the book is in chronological order, starting from right after World War II, of a family, following them through a couple of generations. And finally, halfway through the book, I switched to different accounts from different people, and then people from all over the world. You know, I've traveled a lot, and I think because I am open to this kind of information, I meet people who are of the same vibe, so to speak. You know, they hear about stories and they ask me, what do you write about? You know, and at the time I was writing screenplays, so I tell them that, and, oh, you know, that's so interesting and so different and everything else. You know, if you're talking about like UFOs, I had this experience, et cetera, et cetera. And then it also led to stories about, strange hauntings, ghosts, and demonic stuff. So that's how the book came about. And eventually I just compiled them all. I always carry a notebook with me. And then, eventually I sat down and started to just put them all together. And there you have it.
Now, are these? I know you sent me some material recently, which I'm going to use in a book on kind of negative poltergeist and ghosts and things that we'd rather not have go bump in the night. Have you found these entities to be a mixed bag? I mean, are some of them kind of benevolent, or some of them pretty negative out there, and some of them don't even know we're around?
Let me digress. I remember the evening when I sent you those 2 chapters from the book.
Yes, right.
I know originally my publisher had sent you the PDF of the entire book. Right. And I know that was pretty big. So when I sat down that evening after, I think we were chatting by email.
That's correct, yes.
I then went back to my den, and this was later in the evening, and I was actually trying to look for the word format of the book. What was really a little unusual about that was, I wouldn't say unusual, it actually is kind of bizarre, is that I had difficulty, number one, looking for it. And then when I did find those 2 chapters, I just sensed a presence in the room. This is not to scare you or anything. I think I followed that with a footnote after I sent that. I might have made the comment to Tim Swartz, actually, that I felt like there was something behind me or next to me as I was trying to type away and trying to highlight the 2 chapters to send to you. So, things happen. And for some reason, and this is just my belief, my theory, is that sometimes when we delve in these things that are negative, as in the case of this particular story that you're talking about, and of course I'll tell you what the story is if you'd like me to, is that, we draw the energy to us, whatever that energy is, because somehow we're interested in it. And just by the act of being interested in it and discussing it, we attract those type of beings.
I guess that's why a lot of people are led to believe that they should stay clear of the Ouija board. Although I haven't found that to be the case. If you set up a protective barrier around you and follow the right, formula for a positive communication, you're not very likely to get, there's all sorts of entities floating around out there, and I guess they are looking for the opportunity to, come through here and in a lot of cases tease us, right? Lie to us. But some of them, on the other hand, seem to be very benevolent. I mean, we've heard of cases of people who have been healed by aliens and spirits and angels and things along that line, right?
Yeah, right. Have you ever tried the Ouija board? Have you?
Oh, I have. Yes. Now, most of the time, it's just been total gibberish and a waste of time. To be honest with you, I don't find such. My psychic ability has been hunches that just hit me right, smack dab, and you say it, and it's there, and that's that. But I've had friends who like to sit around and put a little talcum powder on the board and sit there with a brew or 2 and spend the good part of the evening trying to contact the spirits. And on occasion, at least one occasion, a lady friend of mine who's now deceased, Vivian St. John, she was a well-known professional wrestler. We did have a contact and a communication that actually told us what had happened to her husband. She was separated at the time, but he was staying at our apartment on and off because he had disappeared. He said he was going to be home on a particular day, and he didn't. And the board told us what had happened, that he had been in a minor accident and then ended up in the hospital in this little town in upstate New York. And lo and behold, when he walked through the door with a bandage on his forehead, and we asked him what had happened, and he told us a story which was pretty much identical to what the Ouija board told us. And there was a lot more to it. I've written up the experiences floating around somewhere on the internet, and probably in our blog, I think, Tim. Right? But anyway, we want to hear about your experiences. Well, so why don't you tell us this the story that's going to be in the book?
Okay, so the book opens with, the background of the Philippines. It's a little known destination. Usually people associate it with a tropical paradise. It sits strategically right in the middle of Asia, which is important to remember when you think about World War II. Not to bore you, but I'll give you a little bit of a background about how this country was affected by World War II. Around the same time that Europe and the U.S. was engaged with the devastation of the Holocaust and its aftermath, the Philippines was struggling with its own, and the enemy at the time was the Japanese. So the war, which I understand began back 1938 and didn't end until 45, pretty much, because it was a very small country, pretty much devastated the entire country. It was very, very tragic. A lot of families were separated. A lot of people were murdered, butchered, massacred, taken out of their homes, their properties destroyed. In the aftermath of that, and this is, something that I've heard repeatedly and read about, is that every time you have events that unfold that are incredibly traumatic, violent, tragic, that alters people's lives forever, what you end up are just immense areas where hauntings occur. Because these are people whose lives were totally destroyed, just like that. And the violence leaves everything in devastation. And for years and years, you see hauntings. So we now go into an area at the aftermath of war where there's tremendous rebuilding. And not just Manila, which is the central hub, the metropolis, but also the surrounding areas where there's a cluster of little towns. One of those little towns is called San Juan, and it's probably about 50 miles outside of Manila. So it's kind of like similar to the distance between Philadelphia and, the little towns in Bucks County. So when you look at that little town and the rebuilding of it, there's a particular family who's trying to put their lives together. And there's, at this point, 6 children in the family. The gentleman who is the head of the family is a medical doctor. He was involved in the war in a MASH unit. His wife was a dentist, and she saw part of the war. But at the time, her children were small. And one of her children, who is the second to the oldest, had already experienced her own ghostly encounter when she was still a young child. So during the war, as they were fleeing the Japanese, this woman fled with her, at that time, 4 children, and they went north. They were fleeing on foot, hitching rides, doing what they can. It was just all total chaos, while her husband was in the forces and had joined the MASH unit. As she went up north, she encountered a huge convent. The convent had already been plundered. And when I say plundered, obviously, soldiers were in there, had ransacked it, and there was nothing left. The nuns were gone. The convent had been abandoned, and whatever devastation they did to it, it now sits empty with the detritus of war. Furniture is broken. Things are strewn about. Into this, she managed to open the door that was partly broken, and she entered with her children, and they were at this point starving, since they had already depleted whatever food they had brought with them. Their intention was to find shelter for the night, a place where they could hide away from whatever could be out there until they could keep proceeding north and finally maybe join some people they know. As they were looking around this huge building, which is made of stone and it's Spanish style with huge windows, the younger child, the second to the younger child, she was a little bit more carefree, a little bit more rebellious, I guess is the word to use. She decided to wander off on her own. And you got to remember, this is now later in the evening. Night had fallen, and the mother pretty much was trying to find a way to get her children comfortable and then maybe forage for whatever food they could find. The convent was in the middle of a wooded area. And back then, the Philippines had mostly dirt roads because they were still kind of in the early stages. And the Spanish, after colonization for a number of years, 400 years, there was still a very strong influence to use carriages, horses, and things of that nature. So they were just using motor cars at that point. They did not own one at the time, and she had to travel on foot. So while inside the convent, she was trying to settle the other 3 children. She didn't even think to look for the 4th that had wandered off. And the child had gone upstairs, actually, to explore and see if there were beds. And she did find them. She's proceeding down the hall now. And if you want to follow me, it's dark on the right and on the left. It is extremely quiet. There is no one there. You can see that there was mayhem, there was broken furniture, and she entered a room that had about a dozen beds. And she's just a child. She didn't realize it was a place where the nuns probably slept. And into that room she entered, and the only light she had was the light that was coming outside from the nighttime air.
All right, Adele, I'm going to have you hold it right there. We're going to have a cliffhanger because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break. When we come back, Adele will continue her story on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Our guest tonight is Adele Rocha, and she was in the process of telling a story from her book. And so, Adele, just keep on going. I know everybody's anxious to hear what happened here.
Okay, the cliffhanger, and we're back. So before the break, I was talking about this child who was about maybe 7 or 8 years old at the time. She's walking down the hallway of a cloister that has been ransacked by the Japanese during the war. At this point, she enters a room and notices that it's a communal bedroom for nuns. She doesn't know that, of course, but there is one, maybe 10 or a dozen beds in the room, and it is surrounded by windows that are open to the night. And we're talking late at night. It is now at this point dark, and the only light that you're going to get is the ambient light that was coming in through those windows. The child then proceeds to take one of the beds. I mean, it's very welcoming. You could just imagine having walked, it was like a death march, trying to walk through the forest, trying to walk through the woods, trying to avoid being detected by soldiers. And she was just a child, and she was just trudging along, and they were all hungry and everything. So she's exhausted. So the beds are welcoming, even though she's alone. She just dashes to the very last one by the window and lies down. And before you know it, she's asleep. By the way, this is the account of the actual person, who is now an older woman, much older woman, obviously. And she awakens in the dead of night and turns away. She had her back turned away and facing the window that was next to her. She awakens and has a sense that there's someone approaching behind her. So she turns in the bed and lying down, she attempts to look through the darkness, and something has come into the room from the door that she had entered on the further side of the room. So it's approaching her, and the first thing she notices is that it's gliding. And she just feels this tremendous fear, this paralyzing fear. And she feels paralyzed and rooted to the bed. Her throat locks. She's unable to scream. At this point, her mother, who is somewhere downstairs, doesn't know where she is. And whatever this creature is steadily coming closer and closer to her. It doesn't make a noise. It's completely silent. And as it takes shape, coming closer to her, she realizes it's a nun. And the nun is dressed in a black garb, like, most nuns did at the time. And it was wearing its traditional veil. And she was unable to see a face underneath the hood where the face should be. So she sits up. She's able to break free from the bed, and she's now sitting up. And suddenly it's just flying at her. And then when she realized it had no feet, it had such a malevolent look of anger. It was.
Ooh, that's rough. No feet. That's pretty rough.
And it approaches her and takes its hand, which was in a fist, and hits her solidly on her thigh. And then at that point, she screams. She starts screaming and screaming. Whatever it was turns and disappears. Just simply disappears. And she feels this chill. And she's crying, and finally she is able to bolt from the bed. She's running, dashes out of the room, down the hallway. She can now hear her siblings and her own mother yelling for her. She's awakened them. And she finally gets downstairs, meets up with her mother, who had wondered where she had gone, and apparently she has done this before, and she was fine. And as the mother was looking and examining her, she was telling her she had been hit. She looks at her thigh, and she had the mark of a huge ring. Now, I'm going to tell you this. When I went to school, a private school, for girls, and it was run by nuns. And it was the Order of St. Paul's. And I do know that when they are ordained, whatever that process is, they're given a ring to wear. Usually the rings either have a cross on them or maybe the face of a saint, something that has something to do with the name that they're given when they're ordained as nuns. This ring had something very sinister on its face, and whatever it is, left an imprint on her thigh.
Now,
That imprint. Go ahead.
Whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Well, can you describe it?
What she told me was that it was definitely not a cross, but it looked like it was some kind of a symbol. But her mother didn't know what it was. She didn't know what it was. It didn't disappear until she was in her early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Did someone to describe this to you so that you could go and, let's say, look it up on the internet and see if you could find a symbol that was similar?
Not really. What I was told was that it was a huge ring and it had like a flat circular surface, and that on there was where the design was. But
now,
it wasn't.
Are we thinking of something satanic?
I don't know. I don't know whether it was a mark that kind of like tagged her, so to speak. And her life became difficult. From that point on, it took a turn. And in retrospect, she's now an elderly woman. Uh-huh. And when she recounted this, she recounted all the events that unfolded since that particular occurrence. Mm-hmm. And what is interesting is that after they got out of that area and Liberation Day came, they all reunited. And her father, who came out of the war, survived the war. And they built a house, the family did, in that little town of San Juan that I had mentioned before.
Yeah.
But it continues because the house that they had built was built on unblessed ground, as they would call it. It had Japanese soldiers that had been buried there, and no one even knew their remains were there until all these hauntings started to happen. So it was a string of events where by the time she was in her 20s, finally, the tragedy had already unfolded for her family.
Mm. It is kind of, you talk about this branding and all, there's this case that's been getting a lot of attention in the press where there's somebody who had a kind of like a cult that they had started in upstate New York, and they were branding the women that belonged to the group, I guess, to show that they were possessions or something to that effect. That does seem to be rather rare, though. Well, we do have cases, of course, and even in in exorcisms and all, where poltergeists have left some kind of markings on the body. I don't know if it's a brand made with a ring necessarily, but I remember actually reading of a case. There might even be a book out on this, of a case in the Philippines where this young woman, I think she was in her late teens or early 20s, claimed that she was being attacked by an invisible spirit, and the police thought she was just either making it up or scratching or marking herself for attention. But even in the squad car on the way to the police station, she apparently was being attacked by some sort of invisible force, and they put her inside a cell for her own protection, and the marks continued, growing like she was being attacked. So I mean that type of it's strange, but it certainly does happen. In fact, I guess when you get down to it, some of these cases are just truly bizarre. They don't, they don't seem to fit in with any pattern. They're just kind of, cases amongst themselves, and you kind of study them and keep, tabs on them to see if anything else shows up of a similar nature. But you say now, was the entire family under some sort of attack, a psychic attack or spell, or did it go beyond this incident?
I think that it's interesting because this is a Roman Catholic nation. I would say 99% of the people there, because of the Spanish influence, was Roman Catholic. So they actually were religious people. This young child didn't grow up to be as religious as the rest of her siblings because she was rebellious. She was different. She took risks, whereas the siblings all basically listened to their parents. But it seemed like as soon as they moved into this brand new home that was built from the ground right after the war, then the hauntings started. I mean, they would see this creature, and I would call him Mumbo Jumbo. He would be sitting in the backyard with glowing red eyes, and you could see that whoever it was bipedal, it was humanoid, it was sitting haunched on the ground. And in the Philippines, it's common to hire servants who actually live there. They sleep there. They have Sundays off. And when they would go out and feed the animals, feed the cats in this case, they would see this thing. And it's like a full body apparition glaring right at them with red eyes. And some of them have described it as very gaunt, as if it had starved to death. So that's one of the things that haunts the backyard. Another one is a shadow creature. There's like a semblance of that person standing right outside the window, so that when you're looking out the window in the dark, you would see it to your right or to your left. And it's usually smoking, so you would see a trail of smoke. And you would get this feeling of dread and a sense that you're being watched. So, when you hear about stories that open, it feels like you're being watched, etc. So this is definitely a house that is like that. And literally almost every room has some kind of anomaly going on with it. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I found the story about Declan and Desmond very fascinating. Just yes, and and also what led up to their appearance.
Mm-hmm. And to this day, I wonder what brought them on. And it's interesting, that you bring that up, because these creatures, and I call them nature spirits, I believe that's what they are. They're small in size, and I believe they lived in the backyard. There's a story in the book, too, about a creature that came out of a mound that was in a woman's, backyard as well. And this one is very similar. The difference, though, is that they look like small children. From what I understand, they're only 3 to 4 inches in size. And they would climb up on the windowsill with what was a nursery in the back of the house. And it seemed like they were engaged in chattering with each other. They would be entertaining, and they carried these almost like gold coins. Now, if you think about, the folklore, the Irish folklore about elves, with the leprechaun carrying a bag of coins, this is very, very similar. So the idea behind it might be something universally seen, not just in an Asian country, but also, in places like Ireland and Scotland. So it is interesting. This one is different, though, because there's no sense of fear attached to them, in the sense that they're just kind of, I guess, they just live there. They live on the ground. They're benign creatures. And there's an entertaining facet to them, almost like they just want to be seen to entertain.
Do you think that there was any kind of connection between them and the what appeared to be a UFO sighting a little bit earlier in the book?
I think you're talking about the one with the owner of the house.
Yeah, the burning moon, I think is how it was referred
to. Well, I don't know that they're associated as much as it happened in the same dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
This one happened on the second floor. And I'll recount it for the benefit of the listeners. In this particular chapter, the woman the same one who fled all the way north to escape the Japanese, she was retiring to bed. And once again, it's late at night. You know, people eat dinner in the Philippines pretty late, 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30. She was intent on maybe doing some knitting or reading or things of that nature when she saw an extremely bright light. And the first thought she had was we must have a full moon out there. And I'm telling you, Tim, it was much brighter than that from what she told me. It was so bright, it was above the roof of the house, and it lit up the yard beneath the house, around the house. So she then proceeded to come towards the window to determine the origin of the light, and it's a casement window. So she climbs up on this casement window, which is pretty deep, and it had wrought iron on it. And so she was leaning, attempting to look over the overhang. And, the dwellings in the Philippines way back then had these roofs that would really jut out much further out, simply because you get a lot of monsoons, a lot of rains that are pretty strong and windy, during a certain season, and you don't want the rain coming in. So they built the roof so that it would jut out, just as protection from the weather. So here she is. She's sitting on the windowsill. She's leaning over, trying to see, what is that? It's so bright. Is the moon really that full? And when you think about a full moon, I mean, we've had full moons here recently. The harvest moon and the whatever they call it. I guess it's called a red moon or something. It
was like the blood wolf moon.
The blood moon. And it's bright, yes. But she said it was just really bright that it seemed like it was sunlight. So to make a long story short, she was leaning over. Finally, she gave up, and then she was overtaken by a sense of exhaustion. She was just so tired, she just wanted to sleep. So she climbs off the window, goes back to the bed, lies down, and is just so exhausted, she falls asleep. And, I would think if that was me, or maybe someone else, that if you saw something that strange, you would emerge from the bedroom, run downstairs, tell the people downstairs there's something out there. Did you see it? Yada, yada, yada. Let's go out into the yard and take a look and see if but she didn't. For some reason, she was just so overwhelmed by exhaustion at this point that she just lay down and she fell asleep. And the next thing she knew, she woke up and it was morning. Mm. She gets out of bed. She goes over to the door, opens the door, and her oldest daughter is just passing by and, says good morning to her. They were starting to prepare breakfast. She said, "What happened to you?" Mm. And she said to her daughter, "I don't know. I'm not feeling well." And she's like, "You got sunburn. Your face is all red." And she was telling her eyes were also hurting. So they then proceed downstairs. They're sitting at breakfast, and she starts to get really nauseous. She's feeling really dizzy, and she ends up at the doctor's. The doctor tells her she's got first-degree burns. And what seemed like, she had some kind of radiation exposure.
It's amazing. And that's and we just managed to talk about just a couple of many fascinating stories that's in your book. And unfortunately, we only have a couple of minutes left in our program. So why don't you let our audience know again the name of your book and where they can find it, and also where they can find you online as well.
Oh, okay. Well, the name of the book is Portal: A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences. It is available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And you can find me on Facebook under my name, Adele Casales Rocha. I'm also on Instagram, or you can follow me on Twitter. And the handle is both my dogs, @Fox, N with a letter N, and Rosanna, Rosanna. So that's how you would find me. And Amazon is the source of the book.
All right, fantastic. Well, it's an excellent book, yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very, very. Yeah, it just one page rolls right after another. I mean, it has drama in it. I mean, a lot of ghost books and weird books and things like that, they're case histories, but this has drama. Well, you can tell that you've had experience as a scriptwriter and all that too, because it just flows. Anyway, I want to thank you for being on, and don't forget to check out the archives of all our past shows. You can find them on our YouTube channel, which is Mr. UFO's Secret Files. I think, Tim, we're almost up to 400 interviews or around there. I mean, some really exciting material, that, yeah. Some of the best guests, some of the best shows in the paranormal, and we will continue to bring our listeners up to date on this very magical and mystical field.
Well, and Adele, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
A pleasure having you, and pleasure reading your book. So good night to you. Good night, Tim. Good night to our audience.
and thank you, Tina, and Peter, and Helen, and Carol, and everybody who makes the show and all our work possible. And, of course, you can check us out also on Amazon. We've got about 300 titles there.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.